Hi everybody and welcome to the video and live streaming show. My name's John Lacey and I'm joined as always by Sam Proof. Today on the show we're talking about the Elgato Stream Deck and the ways that you can use that to make your content creation a little bit more streamlined and efficient. So we'll be talking about that on today's show, but we are going out live to all the various places. So if you are watching live, let us know in the chat with the thing that I just refuse to stop trying to make happen, which is hashtag Team Live. And if you're watching later on, you can do hashtag Team Replay. But Sam, how are you going?
I don't even know. Yeah, I'm good. This was actually a less busy week, but my daughter decided to be just completely sick for the entirety of the week. So I've been just like tending to her and not doing pretty much anything else. Like every time I sat down with my computer, I was like, I want to do 5 things. Also, a nap would be great. So that's where I'm at. How you doing, John?
I completely agree with you. This week has been... I feel like I complain about how busy life is generally from week to week, but this week has been rather difficult on a number of personal levels, and I don't want to get too doom and gloom at the beginning of the show, but I didn't get the Learn live streaming newsletter out this week because it did coincide with my brother's funeral. And my body is just falling apart. Like the aches and pains from my legs and hips are just insane. I don't know what's going on there, but we're going to just put that to one side and get stuck into today's show. But I guess, you know, we talk about live happening, but life also happens. And I think in some ways you've got to be in it to win it, but you've also got to just, there are some weeks where you just have to decide that it's not the most important thing and just put it to one side. So the newsletter should be back next week, but thank you to the people that have supported me and my family this week. I have really appreciated that. So let's check in with the comments before we get stuck into the main content. Hello to Saeed, who's joining us over on YouTube today from Germany, and Raindrops and Ripples has an emoji, which I'm not even entirely sure what that is, but thank you nonetheless.
That is the high paw from Cute Avalanche. So it's
an
H
of course,
and then an I made of a paw. So yeah,
I knew there'd be a cat connection there somewhere. And hello to CG, who's joining us as well. Okay, so this is the video and live streaming show. Today we're talking all about the Stream Deck, and as much as I'm inclined to sort of call it the Stream Deck, it's really an entire family of devices, and it's sort of growing all the time. So yeah. I was going to show you the mini, but I left it in the other room. But certainly, I've got my extra large here, and I'm always a bit scared to do this on camera in case I rip out the wrong cable. Because if you know anything about me, my cabling situation is a hot mess. But essentially, there's a whole bunch of different devices in this family from Elgato, and I've done a roundup of them in one of the previous newsletters, but essentially, they usually have buttons and things and happening that you can sort of program to do whatever you want. Some of the newer ones actually have knobs and sliders. There is a foot pedal, which I know Sam was really excited about when it first became available. But do you want to maybe tell us about the model you've got there, Sam?
Yeah, so I have the original, the basic, and we've held these up so many times that like seconds before today's show, I was like, I'm putting this friggin' thing on an extension because I know I'm going to do that, and I don't want to rip the cable out. But so yeah, mine is 15 buttons, and yeah, that's the basic version. I don't even know what they call it anymore. It's the regular, the old school Stream Deck. I don't know. But,
it's one of the earlier versions because I don't even think you can actually buy that one new anymore. But essentially, it's got the buttons. You can program them. You can work with them however you like. The first one I had was the Mini. It has 6 buttons on it, not 8, as Saeed helpfully pointed out during the week. And I really, really liked it, but the problem was I just felt like I was running out of buttons. I had to go to different pages or profiles to sort of add extra things. And now I've got the Stream Deck Extra Large, which, you know, I don't want to do math live on the stream, but it has a number of buttons there. And the truth is, I never use all of these buttons, but the thing I like about it is I can spread them out and have some deliberately empty slots in there to help me know what is actually happening on each one. So
yeah, I think
sort of gives me some options.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice model to have. I like, you know, if you've got a lot of stuff, especially if you're doing like streaming or editing, and there should be a good amount of stuff available to you, it's good to be able to space them out like that. Whereas like with the 15, I often am like, great, and I'm crammed as many things that are related to like, audio on this particular screen. I've crammed as many things as possible on like cutting and splicing and all the editing stuff. Like I would love a bigger one for stuff like that. But again, yes, you can do multiple pages. I think it maxes out at 10. I don't know if the newer ones have a different thing there, but you can do pages and folders. So you're not really limited, but there is a nice aesthetic to having more buttons.
Yes, yeah. It's and to be honest, like even the small one is quite helpful. And I guess the other thing that I see, and I think Saeed can probably speak to this because he has both the extra large and the plus on his desk, and he also uses the mobile app in his pocket. So I guess that's the other thing we didn't mention. There is an iOS app and an Android app, and they do work slightly differently. And as always in this world in which we live, the iOS people seem to get all the fun toys, and us Android people just have to suffer. But that's certainly another option, and you can sort of trial those things out for free. So that's often a good intro point to this world. But Sam sort of alluded to pages, so I guess folders, and what was the other thing you mentioned?
Yeah, there's pages and folders.
Pages and folders, and I guess there are also profiles.
That's true. Yes.
And the interesting thing about profiles, and I was really excited about this for 5 minutes until I found it incredibly annoying, is you can actually set up a profile, say for Photoshop or Illustrator, and you can actually go into the software and say every time that program has physical, it's on top
if
of
I
everything
open
else.
Photoshop, open this profile kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And in some ways that can be useful, but I must admit I found it really annoying, so I stopped very quickly.
Yeah, I love the profiles. I have probably 20 different profiles, but the auto switch was, I agree, very annoying, so I don't use that anymore.
Yeah. And I guess we're going to talk about the different things that you can do with these buttons. I guess I would be really interested in hello to Walter Strong III from the Huddle, who's joining us as well. Great to see you. If you do have one of these devices, let us know in the chat which one you have and how you find it and what are the kinds of things that you're actually using it for, because the software can do a lot of different things, and we're going to kind of talk about that in more detail. But I guess the first thing is we need to talk about keyboard shortcuts. Because these can be incredibly useful, but for me, the problem is I've got to memorize these things to know how to use them. And I'm 42, my memory contains a lot of things and probably doesn't have too much spare space. So in a lot of ways, the thing that I like to do is maybe find opportunities to create buttons based on those keyboard shortcuts. So I do have some screenshots I might just talk you through, and then Sam can sort of talk about how he uses them a little bit. But certainly, if you're using a piece of software like StreamYard, which is what we do, if you go into the settings, there's a hotkeys section, and you can find out what those keyboard shortcuts are. You can potentially even change those. Very similar arrangement in Restream Studio. Hindenburg Pro 2, which is a piece of podcast editing software that I use, has its own keyboard shortcuts as well. So if you know what these things are, you can certainly go in and create buttons on your Stream Deck. You can give them icons, you can give them labels, you can sort of arrange them however you like, and that way you can get the benefit of that shortcut without sort of having to memorize all those things. There is one trap, and that's especially with StreamYard and Restream. You literally have to have that window has to have focus to get that keyboard shortcut. But Sam, talk to us a little bit about how you use keyboard shortcuts on these devices.
Yeah, I mean, I do, like everything I do, there's a keyboard shortcut. If I can make a hotkey, I will. I'm going to bring this up real quick just to illustrate John's point about customizing the buttons, and I'm sure it's going to lay out perfectly horrible. But yeah, that's not terrible, actually. But so, this is one of the profiles I had done for a Mob Crush show, and all of these are tied to a hotkey that goes to OBS and does either a different scene switch or a different camera effect or brings up an asset. But as you can see, I was able to put my own custom buttons on there, so like I could visually see them and be like, this is my zoom, this is my my lower third, these are all these things. I don't have to think 3 seconds longer when like It's Alt Control number pad 9. I don't know. One of my quick tips on setting these up, because again, even when you're setting it up, you're going to have to know all of your keyboard shortcuts. I'll set up the hotkey in the Stream Deck first, so that I know like this button activates Control J or whatever it is, and then I go over to OBS where it asks me what the hotkey should be, and then I just hit the button to input it. So I'm like, I 100% know that this is going to be what it is, and it's not doing something else. So I can test it.
That's really clever. I've never thought about doing it in that way. That's really useful. And I guess the other great thing about the keyboard shortcuts, especially if you know you're going to be using a button in place of that keyboard shortcut, you can sort of grab 3 different keys that are not particularly easy to press together on the keyboard because you know you're only doing that once or twice.
Yes.
And there are, no matter what sort of system you're working on, there are a lot of keyboard shortcuts that are already reserved for other things. So you do need to be a little bit mindful of that as well.
Sure.
I just want to check in with the comments again, because I know Saeed has done some great little research for us. So 6 free buttons for iOS. Unfortunately, nothing free for Android, but around $3 per month is still a great deal. It is, again, and it's probably not even worth getting into again because we've done an entire show on this, but I have some misgivings about trusting mobile technology for anything that I'm doing live. But, you know, it is a great starting place. And it's interesting when I reflect on my own experience of using these devices. A part of me wonders if I would have had my time over, if I would have just skipped the mini and just gone to the extra large automatically. But I think they're honestly great options. And it's probably something you can pick up quite cheaply on a secondhand market too, if budget is an issue.
Yeah.
And big hello to the always fashionably late Insomnia Doodles. Thank you for joining us. It's okay. You can join us, or you can not join us. That's fine. We love to see you, but you know, you don't feel like you have to be here all the time. If you can't, we totally understand. Yeah. So today we're talking all about the Elgato Stream Deck and the things that we can do with it to actually sort of improve your processes, going live, editing, promoting, that kind of thing. I guess one of the things, even if you're not sort of in a content creation world, one of the things that has saved me, I swear, years of my life is just having some text responses in my device. So I've got a button that just says "kind regards, John," blah blah blah, and you know I've pressed that thousands of times at this point, and that is really useful. Again, if I've got a promotion or I've got a link or something that I want to share across different social media platforms, if I can assign that to a button, I mean, I could just easily copy and paste that, and sometimes I do that as well. But this is sort of just another option in terms of automating that. And you do have an option to sort of say, hit the enter key after you've added this text. So depending if you're in a chat situation, you could do that as well to actually post it as well.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I use the Stream Deck for, you know, obviously live streaming. I do it for editing. I use it in my Zoom calls. I use it in my Dungeons and Dragons weekly games. Like it's, you know, endlessly useful in to do anything. Like if you've done something where you've you've done something repeatedly more than once, make a button. It takes 5 seconds, right? Yeah, and yeah, there's just I probably have hundreds between the two computers, hundreds of buttons created to do a myriad of tasks. And what's really cool about the Stream Deck versus just doing a hotkey is that you can actually assign multiple functions to a single button. So I have some buttons that do as many as like a dozen different things.
Yeah, so I mean, you do have there is a random option too, which I've never figured out a good use for it, but I'm dying to hear, and I imagine someone somewhere will have a good answer for that. But yeah, certainly the ability to do a number of things, to take an action to time it out before taking a second action. That's incredibly useful as well. So there's all kinds of things you can do with it. I just want to check in with the chat one more time and say the facilitator has written, I once used a hotkey that was a global shortcut in Windows. It drove me crazy until I figured out what I had done. Just saying, choose your hotkeys wisely. And I think that's very, very good advice. So we're going to come back and talk about how we can use these devices specifically in terms of going live in just a moment.
We are constantly training our cats every interaction that we have with them. So when Johan would get on my counter before, this is 10 years ago, before I was the cat expert that I am now, Johan would jump on the counter. What was the first thing I did? I'd say his name, Johan. He loves that. That's a reward for him. He said, you just said my name. I would go over to him and I'd talk to him and be like, you can't be on the counter. Johan loves when I talk to him. Ding, that's another reward for Johan. I'd pick him up and put him on the ground, but I didn't want him to think I was mad at him. So when I'd pick him up very nicely and kiss him on the head and say, I love you, but you can't be here. I'd put him on the ground. I had just done 3 things that rewarded him for being on the counter. So I was encouraging him to continue doing that.
And that's a segment from Sam's podcast, Just Kidding Around, which you can learn more about over at cuteavalanche.com. This is the video and live streaming show. Today we're talking all about the Elgato Stream Deck family of devices and what you can use them with to make your content creation processes that little bit more efficient. So let's talk about actually going live. So obviously this is the video and live streaming show, so we talk about live a lot. But Sam, what are some of the things that we can actually do with this device in terms of going live?
Everything. If you're using OBS, you can tie like just about everything to a hotkey and then to a Stream Deck button. A lot of them are already built in. If you want to use it as a camera switcher, like switching between scenes, you can do that. Like that's just built-in functions. You can hide and reveal sources. If you have the one with knobs, you can adjust your volume. I think there might be a way to actually do that with buttons now too, but I haven't actually looked into that. And yeah, you can start streaming, you can start recording, you can stop streaming, stop recording, start your your vertical. If you have the vertical plugin, start that to record and stream. I have a button that does both of those at once, so I'm recording on both simultaneously, so hopefully there's a pretty identical cut on those. Turn on my virtual cam and stuff. That might be the one that I haven't bothered to make a button for, but you could easily do that. I have one that does studio mode, which gives you this split so you can see the preview of what you're working on. And it just does everything. Like you can tie like 99% of all functionality in OBS to a hotkey. There's very few things that are like sort of hidden, and most of those things are things you just want to deal with once anyway. So yeah, if anyone ever has a question of like, how do I make this happen in OBS, hit me up and I will show you. It won't be hard. One of the things I do a lot of is tie it to a chat bot for my stream, which also has the ability to affect things in OBS. So I'm like hitting it from 2 angles.
Nice. I haven't really planned this out, but I'm going to try and share part of my screen with you. So this is actually the Elgato Stream Deck software. And there are a number of things that just come in by default in terms of the Stream Deck and your system options, but you can actually go into the store, and we'll talk about that in a second, and grab sort of software-specific plugins. So we've got one here down here for OBS Studio that has things like recording, pausing your recording, streaming, using the virtual camera, the replay buffer, changing scene collections, changing different profiles and scenes and source visibility, and all kinds of things that are really, really quite useful. Again, I don't do a lot with Streamlabs, but I did have a friend reach out to me, ask a few questions. So I had been playing with that a little bit towards the end of last year, and it certainly has its own options in there as well. So there's a lot of, and I think in some ways, we talk constantly about how there are a lot of different moving parts when it comes to actually running a live stream, and to the extent that you're able to, it's often a really, really good idea to sort of simplify this as much as is humanly possible. So in some ways, especially if I'm going out of OBS, and I don't do my pure OBS show as much as I used to, but I would literally have my different scenes set out in the order in which I would use them. And often that would mean I'd have multiple buttons for the same scene, but I just knew whatever the last button was, I needed to press the one to the right of it for the next option. So in some ways, that makes it really easy. And I don't really need to use my keyboard. I might still need to use my mouse if I want to interact with the comments a little bit. But in a lot of ways, that really frees me up to sort of just to do some more simple things and not sort of obsess over. And in some ways, it frees you up to be more present with your audience and check in with the comments and things like that, rather than simply, sort of be too bogged down with the technology. And that's the reality of a lot of this live streaming is you are it. You are the producer. You are the on-air talent. You're doing everything. Okay, so I know there are some... there are a lot of chat comments, so let's, as I talk about not ignoring the chat comments, let's not ignore the chat comments. Where do we start? Here we go. So this one, people are mind blown by some very basic features like pasting a text snippet into the chat, such as social media links or instructions. And the truth is, there are certain things that will just crop up all the time. And if you have to physically type that out each time, you'll be resentful about that for the rest of your life.
Sure.
So anything you can do to sort of simplify that could be really, really useful.
Yeah, and I want to say along the lines of Saeed saying there's some very basic functions that you can do. We've talked about how the Stream Deck is buttons, but they're also displays. Like each, one of those Stream Deck buttons doesn't have to be a pushable thing. Like I have a readout on my Stream Deck that tells me my CPU usage. I have one that does every 5 minutes, it runs a speed test. So I know like, oh, great. My, internet connection's doing good. I have 30 megabytes per second coming down. Great. Or going up, actually. I have 100 coming down. Sorry. But yeah, so it's not purely like, oh, now I'm just going to make a million hotkeys. There are, display functionalities that you can have happen as well, which are very useful. And there's more than just that. You can have things like how many viewers are in my stream right now and all sorts of things like that. And it ties to almost every piece of software you could want, especially if you're a streamer. Like Discord, there's a functionality for that. And we're going to answer Insomnia's question that's related to that in just a second, or at least try. So yeah, it does a lot of stuff.
Sure. So... Hey, I don't know where we're going to go with this one, but let's check it out. So Insomnia Doodles writes, I bet you could even create a stream key, a Stream Deck hotkey to order a pizza delivery.
Okay.
I mean, maybe.
I think I could do this. I think I would have to use my chatbot as well. I don't think I can do it straight from the Stream Deck, but maybe. But I think the way this would happen is the Stream Deck itself would trigger an action group in Mix It Up Bot, which then ties to, I think, an IFTTT command, which ties to Dominoes. And I'm gonna build this out later, outside of the screen. I'll totally do this.
Okay, there's another question here, and I guess the short answer to this one is I don't know, but we can endeavor to find out. But Insomnia Doodles asks, do you know off the top of your head if you could get a button to start and stop a Stream Elements giveaway raffle?
Yeah, so this, I think, is probably going to be a similar answer to the pizza one. I believe Stream Elements does have a Stream Deck app, but it might tie into their version of OBS. So if you're not using that, I don't know if it's going to have that ability. But Mix It Up app does have a service connection for Stream Elements, I'm pretty sure. And I'm more confident that they would have that connection built out. So you could do Stream Deck to Mix It Up to Stream Elements.
I must admit, I'm not really particularly familiar with this, but I did just do a bit of a Google search, and it looks like it all comes from sort of chat commands. So depending on the platform, like if you are in Twitch and it is supporting those commands, I mean, you could certainly set up a button that is exclamation mark raffle. You know, that would be very easy to do, and you could even hit that button to say, you know, press the enter key once you've added that to the chat. So as long as you've sort of selected the chat box and hit that button, it shouldn't be that difficult. I wouldn't think.
If it is tied to a Twitch chat command, then you can actually just do Stream Deck to a Twitch message and have it do it that way. Yeah, so if it is just exclamation mark raffle, then 100% you can do it that way.
Okay, cool. I'm ad-libbing in the background here a little bit. There is certainly a Stream Elements se.live plugin that apparently adds controls. Okay, all right. Well, again, that's a little bit outside of my wheelhouse, but I mean, potentially there are ways of doing that. All right, cool.
Yeah.
So I guess, and we did allude to this earlier, but if you aren't using OBS, if you're not using sort of Streamlabs desktop, a lot of the browser-based software does give you options to set up keyboard shortcuts, and this is often the way of getting around the lack of a plugin. So again, in StreamYard, we've got if you go to the settings, you can check out the hotkeys. You can actually change these hotkey buttons too. So if there is a conflict, you can potentially set up a different one. And it works almost identically to that in Restream Studio. So there are certain ways of doing things. And again, I guess, you know, set the buttons up, try them. Don't wait until you're live, because that's always a great opportunity to fall on your face. But, you know, try them ahead of time. Make sure they do what you think they will do. And then once you've got them, it can make your life a lot easier. So that's certainly something to keep in mind. Even just the ability to start streaming and stop streaming and start recording and stop recording is really, really useful as well. So I mean, again, this is harking back to my OBS Pure days, but I would literally have a button that was just start streaming, and OBS would start streaming and start recording at the same time. It was sort of a few less things for me to even have to worry about, so that was really, really useful. Okay, so, and Insomnia Doodles is now watching via 2 platforms, which we appreciate. Thank you for that. All right, so this is the video and live streaming show. Today we're talking all about the Elgato Stream Deck, a library of family of devices. There are a whole bunch of them, but we want to talk about things that you can do in terms of actually going live, creating the content, promoting it, and sharing it out to the world. I guess the other thing that could be quite useful, because, you know, you can't just go live, you've got to tell people you're going live. So think about how you can use this in relation to maybe those social media platforms as well. So yeah, I've sort of alluded to the fact that we have these text responses, and that can be a really great way of saying, hey, I'm currently live, or today we're talking about XYZ, and here's a link. So that's a great little thing. This is a great comment from the facilitator. And I've never done this on the extra large, but I did do this actually on the mini. When my Stream Deck Mini is not in use, it actually has the logo of my old web design business display on it, which is really fun. So you can certainly do that with any kind of graphic or digital photo, just as a bit of wallpaper in there when it's not currently in use. So that's a nifty little thing. Again, you're probably the only one that's going to see that, but it is quite a fun thing. Okay, let's come back and talk about what we can use this in terms of editing for, and we'll continue from there.
And then I looked at the first assessment, and the first assessment was record a 5-minute video, and it was a pretty simple introduction of yourself. There was nothing exciting. I didn't have to research. It was just a 5-minute warm-up, and I freaked out. That course is still sitting in the cupboard beside me. I see that stack of papers and I almost rock in the corner. It cost me a lot of money to sign up, and I threw the whole course away.
And that's a segment from my podcast, Build a Presentation Muscle, which you can learn more about over at johnlacey.com. That was Michelle J. Raymond talking about getting over her fear of being on camera. And she's literally in San Diego right now for Social Media Marketing World. So It just goes to show, you know, you can sort of get over the fears and turn them into huge opportunities. So it was great to talk to her on her podcast recently too. So that was really awesome. But today, on the video and live streaming show, we're talking all about the Elgato Stream Deck. And that's a whole bunch of different devices, foot pedals and things with touch screens and volume controls and buttons and all kinds of fun things that you can work with in terms of really just using your computer in general. But I guess even more than that with our focus on content creation and editing and going live and promoting your content as well. So let's talk about editing, because I think editing is a really useful thing to do. I know not everybody does it, and not everybody has the capacity to do it and the time, frankly. It's one of those weird things. I really love editing, but I don't have enough time in my week to do as much of it as I'd like to. So you will see the occasional clip from this show and maybe some other interviews that I've done, but I don't put out as much as I would like to, which is really annoying, but that's probably a discussion for another day. But in terms of editing, and I know this is the video and live streaming show, I know we're all about the video, but I'm going to sort of take a little break from that and talk about the audio podcast that I just alluded to. And this is Hindenburg Pro, which is a piece of software that I use for editing my podcast, and sort of I actually use it to process the audio on my videos these days too, because it just does such a really good job. And again, in the same way that we sort of described creating keyboard shortcuts for other pieces of software, you can do that here as well. It's always a good idea to go to the software, to go to the manual, find out what these things are, or even just go to the settings and work out what they are. And that way you can certainly set up those keyboard shortcuts so you don't have to memorize all of this, because one of the pieces of software I edit in has, I think, Control S for splitting a clip, and one of them has Control B. I'm not really sure what the B stands for, but I can never remember which is which. So that's a bit of a struggle for me. And I know, Sam, we've spoken about CapCut in the past, and it has its own keyboard shortcuts, but it also lets you select similar pieces of software. Yes. So if you already have existing knowledge of those, you can use those. So how do you use the Stream Deck in terms of editing?
Yeah, so I mean, I originally was using Adobe Premiere, and I believe I actually found somebody else had laid out a bunch of those commands and stuff for Stream Deck. I don't remember if I actually got a whole template that was just built, or they just had, here's all the icons for you. It may have just been that. And so, you know, I have like 4 or 5 pages dedicated to Premiere, but with CapCut, as you said, I can have it mostly mimic that. And it has some functionality that Adobe has some functionality that CapCut doesn't, which, you know, was really like getting into like the minute details of like audio, which I had an entire page of just audio editing for, and it doesn't really do that quite the same level of it. But yeah, when I was doing like Adobe, I could zoom in and widen my sine waves in both waves. You know, I could do all my cuts and stuff like that. I'm looking at it right now, and like I had entire like routines. So one of the things I learned early on with like editing, because I did editing for a show called Dish Nation, and one of my responsibilities was to cut about 12 different promos in less than 3 hours. And so automation was a huge thing for me then, and that is probably my first big taste of it, and I carried over to every editing thing I've ever done. So if I see myself doing the same thing more than 2 or 3 times, I'm like, well, screw it, I'm building something out that does this thing. So I have an entire page for when I was working at like Mob Crush that does just a routine of things, and it's like 5 buttons across. So I know like the first step is, you know, it goes in and selects this and goes to the timeline and like lays into the text thing, and then I had another button that does another thing, and so on and so forth. So it's like I can lay out an entire it was like a montage video where we have like 20 different clips, and I have a spreadsheet that has like, here's the name of the creator, here's the caption we want. And, you know, it would just go back and forth between these programs. And I would just be like, button, watching, and it's done. Button, watching, and it's done, you know? So yeah, I have huge amounts of like automation for editing.
Nice. And I just want to note that Saeed is telling me that the B stands for blade in that context. So that's a useful thing to know. Again, this is a little bit outside of the scope of the editing segment, but I do want to talk about it because I think it's a really good observation. So Saeed has written, I haven't tried it yet, but you can also control the comments in Social Stream Ninja with the Stream Deck, like moving to the next comment. Do you use it or do you show them manually? I always use the mouse is the short answer. Yeah. I don't know, Sam, if you do something different.
I also use the mouse. Social Stream Ninja is one of those things that I have not put the time in to like find all the details, because all I want is that, you know, funnel of chats in one place. And if it does other stuff, I think I use the ability to put things on screen. But yeah, I haven't looked at all the things it does at this time. But yeah, that's good to know. I might use that, but generally I don't have a chat that goes, you know, next to next. I mean, I guess the kitten cam to some extent, we answer almost everything live, but yeah, I feel like that's not necessarily helpful all the time. Like there's going to be comments you want to skip, right?
Yeah. I guess like if anybody on the planet is thinking about that, I'm sure the developer of the Ninja Doc stuff is, because he's just such a switched on guy, and I think
he's great.
I want to call him Steve. I'm sorry if I'm getting that wrong, but I think it is Steve.
That's right.
But yes, he's very thoughtful, and I'm sure if there is a way, you could certainly do it. I mean, there are all kinds of, like I'm saying let me speak for myself. I kind of literally just use it to bring comments into OBS, but it can literally read them out to you. It can do all kinds of wild and wonderful things. I think it can do like emote walls and things. So it's probably worth digging into. And Saeed, if you find out, let us know, report back, because we'd love to find out about that. That would be really, really cool. So this is the video and live streaming show. Today we're talking all about Stream Deck and the things that you can use it for. And I guess in some ways, I mean, I don't have it set up to run right this moment, so I don't really have the comments on to grab anything. But I kind of imagine you could probably even do something with like just tabbing and shift tabbing between things, and just that general keyboard only focus that some people who don't use a mouse might be able to wrangle. I'm not really sure off the top of my head, but it's certainly something to explore. All right, so let's I guess, was there anything else that we should call out in terms of editing in the Stream Deck specifically? I must admit, I don't use it as much as I probably should be, because I'm kind of set in my ways. I know the software that I use pretty well. Although that said, I got a new computer at the beginning of the year, and one of the things I was really eager to dig into is actually using DaVinci Resolve. Mm-hmm. And I sort of mentioned to Sam during the week, I downloaded some DaVinci Resolve projects from our Restream show, and brought them in and did a bit of editing with them. But I still have a lot to learn on that front. So I don't know if I'm quite going to leave Camtasia right now, because I think that's the other thing. And I feel like I'm always saying this, but I think it's always true. Often the best tool is just the one you have access to and you know how to use deeply. I don't think you should jump between tool to tool unless you have a really compelling reason, because there will be that learning curve and it's not insignificant. Yeah,
for sure. Like, you know, I tried to get into DaVinci Resolve because I was like, it's, you know, obviously a stronger program than CapCut in a lot of ways. It does a lot of other things. I think they've added a bunch of sort of AI tools to help do other things faster. And I was just like, you know what? I don't need to do these things. Like, I'm not lacking for what I want to be able to do with the limited amount of time I have to, you know, edit these days anyway. So I just got rid of it. But it looks like a fantastic tool. And I do have a Stream Deck profile built out for it.
It's funny, and I know Insomnia Doodles had to run, but I was just looking at my Stream Deck software, and even though I I've got something here called Streamlabs, and it actually has a spin wheel option, which I don't know if that's the same as Stream Elements. It perhaps isn't, but I thought that was an interesting thing that I just noticed.
Yeah, they're different, but yeah,
yeah,
similar.
I'm sure
That's
conceptually you could make that work, but
for sure.
All right, awesome. So this is the video and live streaming show. We're going to come back and talk about something that I don't know if everybody with a Stream Deck actually even know exists, which is their marketplace, because it's a recent invention. I mean, it's been around for a while, but it's sort of had a bit of a rework. So we'll come back and talk about that in just a second. And I'm going to press this one here.
If you've been watching us for a while, or this is your first time and you're thinking, Sam, John, this is great stuff, but I'm wearing a lot of hats already and I don't need to add this to my list of things that I'm doing, but I really want to live stream, I've got you covered. I've been a freelance technical director and stream operator for 20 years, and I can help you either with one-on-one counseling, setups of shows, or even run your whole show for you. Get in touch with me, samproof@gmail.com, or find out more at samproof.tv.
And if you do need those services, Sam is probably your man, so get in touch with him and he can help you with those live production services. But let's talk about we've been talking about the Elgato Stream Deck, but I think a really important part of this, and again, I'm not sure if people realize how much is in this. It's the Elgato Marketplace. I've kind of referred to it as the store, but essentially this is the place where you can take the basic options and sort of take them up a level. So we have things like plugins, we have icons, we've got different profiles that are already built out for you. We've got sounds and music, so it's copyright free or royalty free stuff that you can use as long as you own one of these devices. There's even screensavers, which I didn't even know was a thing. But essentially, this is the place where if you've got a piece of software and you're thinking, how can I use this? Go into the store and search for it, first of all, because if there is a plugin, that will work usually much more efficiently than doing the keyboard shortcut thing.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, even if there isn't, especially for creators, if you need assets, if you need the ability to add some copyright-free music, royalty-free music into your project, that is a great place to actually start. So I must admit, it's not something I spend a lot of time in, but every time I go in there to sort of have a poke around, I'm really impressed by all the things that are actually available. So Sam, are there any things on the marketplace that you might particularly recommend?
I don't remember like all the things like, but I mean, yeah, I think that the sound effects is really cool. Like if you are someone who wants to have like a whole soundboard, like that's right there for you. And it's easy to search. Like their searchability is pretty good, which is cool. And, you know, having royalty-free music is something that all creators need to make a bank of. So, you know, spend an hour or two, look through it, find a dozen songs that are like, these are songs that I will use. And, you know, I think a lot of creators, especially on the video side of things, go into music looking for like every single time. They're like, what's the perfect song for this? No, pick 10 to a dozen and just reuse them. Those become sort of iconic to your brand at that point. But there's just tons of plugins, you know, like if I go down the list, I have, Mix It Up and Twitch and my Philips Hue lights and my Govee lights, Bar Raider, which Facilitator just mentioned in the chat as well. I have those. I think they actually have two different ones if I look at my thing. There's a plugin for Zoom and Discord and OBS Studio and all of that stuff. So those are all the ones that I pretty much have. And yeah, I have a bunch of icon sets from their graphics as well.
Yeah, and I guess like even while you're talking and I'm sort of poking around in the background, they've got a graphics section, and within the graphics section there are overlays, there are alerts, there are badges, there are emotes, there are counters, there are other design resources.
Yep.
You've even got sort of video backgrounds, transitions, some After Effects templates. Some of these things are paid offerings, so I guess that's worth noting, but there are some free stuff in there as well. And in terms of the audio, you mentioned the sound effects, there's music. my first sort of live stream show, I used royalty-free music from this service as my intro and outro music. So it has a special place in my heart, certainly. But of course, the plugins themselves are really where the magic happens. And again, with any kind of technology, the rate of change is huge. So if you haven't sort of had a look in these recently, it's often a good place to revisit. I know Sam alluded to the fact that you have a lot of utilities that don't actually do anything, but will give you feedback, like, you know, how your CPU is going and your memory. That's certainly a good thing to do. I can't believe we've gotten through 43 minutes of this show without mentioning muting and unmuting audio, because that's sort of the bane of everyone's existence.
Yes.
If you've ever been in a meeting, and it's funny, I have a very old video about that and setting up a keyboard shortcut about it. And somebody in the week was like, but you didn't press the keys. And I'm like, I think the context for that video was basically different software have different shortcuts and you press your own keys based on what you're working with. But there are all kinds of things in there as well. Saeed's got some great examples here. So he mentioned the bar rater one earlier, but I have something that is called something like mouse pointer. It's a magnifying glass or a highlighter, great for screen sharing. I'm going to just see if I can find that one in here. Mouse pointer. There's mouse spotlight, which seems to possibly be what he's referring to. So I mean,
sorry, go on.
So I mean, there are all kinds of things in there, and it really probably is worthwhile to go in and have a look. And maybe we'll do that in a future show. We'll dig into these, and we'll get really quite granular about the ones that we love and recommend. So there are all kinds of things. There's even the ability to add clocks to your Stream Deck. So if you wanted to know what time it was in, I don't know, California, Sydney, Australia, and Germany at the same time, you could do that really easily. So it just depends on what you're working with and what you need. But you know, once you've paid for the device, there are plenty of cool free options out there, and even the paid ones aren't massively expensive. So
I was just looking at them, and for anyone who's like doing some serious work, like any of the Adobe software, DaVinci has like a paid thing. Notion has a paid profile. So they have these profiles. They're all between like $20 and $35. So they're completely built out. They have all the buttons set up for you and the functionality, and they use the same icons that the software uses. So those are really great. Like, you know, it's definitely something to look at. I'm curious. They actually have one for OBS Studio. It's $9, which is not terrible if you don't know what you're doing. I'm like, that's cool.
So like a third party has created that.
Yeah,
that's interesting. Yes. Again, it's really interesting, and I don't know, we don't have the time to get into it, but I know I believe OBS Studio, the OBS project, even has its own sort of Patreon these days. So
yeah, I think
what
so.
has historically been completely free and open software is like the lines are blurring a little bit. But again, you don't have to pay for that unless you particularly feel compelled to do it. One thing, and I kind of want to ask Saeed about this. And because I know Bar Raider has its Windows Mover and Resizer plugin, and I've tried to use this in the past, and I haven't had a lot of joy with this. But I guess for me, I have my 3 separate monitors, and I kind of, if I want to stay focused on the teleprompter, I kind of need to move different things into that view from time to time. So I would love to pick your brain on that one. But again, it's a great call out from Saeed. Not every plugin is Windows and Mac. Windows does seem to have more.
Yeah, that is a fair call. And also along those lines, if you do look at the profiles, all those profiles are specific to different models. So pay attention to that. I'm sure, you know, to some extent they'll work on any model, but if you're getting one that's for the like a Stream Deck Plus that has the knobs, you're going to miss out on some of that functionality and have paid for that. So don't pay attention.
And I must admit, like one of the when we first started doing this show, we were very focused on news items, and the Stream Deck Plus had just come out, and we were talking about it. And I as much as I can appreciate the different uses of those knobs, I personally don't have a great use for them, because a lot of my audio, I've got physical sliders and things that I can adjust. So it does depend a little bit on what your goals are, but there are certainly ways of doing different things.
Yeah,
and if you're incredibly... Yeah, go
I was
ahead.
just going to say, I think with the knobs, I would actually have more use for them if I was using like an editing software or Adobe just to do like a zoom in, zoom out kind of thing, or some other things where I just want to be nudging small amounts of like shifting my audio over kind of to audio sync kind of thing. But, yeah.
Nice. It's funny. Somebody asked me a really long time ago. They'd seen a stream where somebody had just random. They were sharing a browser window, and they just randomly zoomed into a part of the screen, and they were like, "How did they do that with?" And I think they were only using StreamYard, and it took me forever to figure it out. But what it was that the person that was sharing that screen had a touchscreen laptop. And you can literally just pull in and drag in a way that you can't unless you have that. So
Yeah, that's awesome.
it's funny. There are different ways of doing things. Yes, this is a great point too. Although, so say it's saying using only use the knobs for the Elgato lights and volume. So that's good. The thing about the Elgato key light in particular is it's based on, like, you communicate with it via Wi-Fi. And what that basically means for me is that I would be streaming via Wi-Fi, which is not something I would recommend to anybody. So the way I turn on my lights and adjust them is via my phone. But if I was on the same Wi-Fi network for both my computer and the lights, I could do all kinds of things with them via the Stream Deck. But I don't want to be at the mercy of the Wi-Fi connection, especially here. Because I discovered during the week that my internet connection had taken quite a beating. We had a blackout some weeks ago, and it had never been the same since. But even just checking between this computer, which has the power line adapter, and some other computers that are just Wi-Fi, the difference in speeds is surprisingly large. Okay, I thought Sam was going to say something then, but
I lost it. I was, and it's gone. But I do. I don't know. I mean, I typically turn my lights on through my Echo device because they're all on smart plugs. So I'll just come in and tell her to turn them on, and just everything goes on at once.
And say it's giving me some feedback, which I'll probably need to think about after the show. But yeah, that's fine. Yeah, like whatever works at that point. The Sam thought train just derailed. Thank you for that.
It's just the Banana Splits theme song up there. La 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 la.
So this is the video and live streaming show. Today we've been talking about the Elgato Stream Deck family of devices. Again, there are all kinds of devices, and you can head over to elgato.com. This isn't a paid promotion or anything. We just like these products. Although, if they ever want to send us stuff, we would be very graciously open to that. Yep. But certainly, like Sam alluded to the fact that you've got, a 15 key model, something around that.
Yep.
I'm not even going to do the math, but I've got the extra large here. And again, you can see how, you might be able to see how few of these things actually have buttons, although maybe you can't because of the lighting situation. But I like to spread things out quite a bit. So it just depends. And I guess even when I was doing my OBS show, every single week I would check all those buttons and I would change the order based on the show run that I'd put together. So lots of cool stuff, lots of things to experiment with. We've barely sort of touched the surface of these really awesome devices. But if you've got questions, if you've got feedback, we'd love to hear about it. And we'd also love to hear about it if you have things you'd like us to talk about in future shows. So just leave a comment wherever you happen to be watching this. And don't forget to like and subscribe if those things are an option on one of the millions of platforms we seem to be on these days. We'd appreciate that. But Sam, as we begin to wrap things up, where can people find you and watch your content and connect and do all those good things?
Sure, yeah, you can find me at samproof.tv, and you'll see all of my social links at the top there. I'm Sam Proof on just about any platform you could want. And if we didn't talk about cats enough today, head over to cuteavalanche.com, and you'll find our 24/7 kitten cam there. And if you do have something you want to know how to do on the Stream Deck, yeah, leave a comment and ask me, and I will reply as soon as possible.
And as Saeed sort of mentioned at the beginning of the show, even if I haven't used the word cat, I've said Elgato quite a bit today, so it's basically the same thing. But if you want to catch up with me, head over to johnlacey.com. You can learn more about the podcast and check out some articles, and the social links are at the bottom of those pages, so get in touch if you would like to. But have a great week. Thank you so much for joining us. It's always great to have so much happening in the chat. We really appreciate your company. But take care, and we'll talk to you again soon.